Well, I guess we'll get started, man. Thank you guys for coming out to our free seminar series that we do here at Lake Fork Marina every 2 weeks, every other Friday. I got my buddy Cord Huckins is here with me. We got the fall turnover is definitely happening. It's a weird turnover this year. It's a little different than normal. I've talked about it at length on the content that we've done here recently. So if you've been following along with that, I'm sure you've heard it. We'll go over it briefly tonight. But really what we want to do tonight is talk to you guys about kind of how to catch fish. And what's really the general consensus is the toughest time of year. The turnover period, the summer to fall transition, is typically, most people consider that to be the most difficult time of year. So we want to kind of talk to you guys about what the fish do, how they behave, how to pattern them, how to catch them. And also we want to call on you guys to ask questions, because we're going to talk a lot about what's currently happening right now today on Lake Fork, how to catch fish out here right now with the turnover and the transition. But we definitely want to answer any questions y'all have. So if y'all have a question anywhere, anytime, please do ask. If you don't have questions, start thinking now. We're relying on you guys to help us make content tonight. So we're going to need y'all. It's a little bit of an odd turnover in that we never really just got a thermocline this year for whatever reason. I mean, I never really saw much of one here and there a little bit, but never a day in, day out thermocline at a certain depth.
Steady.
You never saw that on Lake Fork this year. We had a lot of cooler than normal water temps throughout the summer. We had a lot of wind this summer. Typically in July, it gets real still and real hot. We didn't ever get that. It got that way for a little bit in August, but not enough to set it up, I guess. And that's why we didn't get that thermocline. Well, with no thermocline, when the lake turns over, so what happens when you have a thermocline is wherever you see that haze, everybody know what it looks like on your graph when you see thermocline, it's got that fuzzy, like at like 18 foot to the bottom, it'll be just a fuzzy return on your graph. Below that line, that water has lost oxygen, and below that line, that water it's just not the same water quality, and it's just nasty, stagnant, no oxygen water. If you've ever seen a really small or shallow muddy pond in the summer and it just gets like gross, you get that stagnant water, it gets the stinking, really. Well, that same thing happens below the thermocline. And then as we transition into fall, surface temps equal the temps down low, and it churns up that stuff, that deoxygenated water and all that trash and junk and just stagnant water from the bottom. Heck, you can even smell it sometimes out here. It stinks sometimes out here because it's turned up that nasty water from the thermocline. That's typically what you experience during turnover is you get deoxygenated water, you get nasty, dirty water, debris in the water, and the fish just go into a major funk. They feel bad. They don't want to eat. They don't want to do nothing. They just are trying to survive. And about the best place they can do it is on the bank, because they can get a little wind current and get a little oxygen generated through any rain or wind current that comes through there. Turning that water up on the bank gives them a little bit extra oxygen. So they kind of scatter out all over the lake on the bank, and it gets real tough to find them or catch them. That's what's happening now, but it's not what's happening now. It's because we don't have all that nasty water developed under the thermocline, the lake is turning over, and you will see pockets. And like me and Cord were just on the water for just a couple hours here right before we came in. We had a couple hours skill, so we went out and fished right across the way to a little pocket right across from the marina here. And at the mouth of the pocket, you can see some of the brown bubbles, just the slightest signs of turnover. But the water wasn't nasty. There wasn't a bunch of debris floating. It was just a little bit of bubbles where you could tell the lake has been churning, bringing some of that bottom water up to the top. But it's not the bad turnover that normally is. What we did see, though, in that pocket were bait and bass on the bank in like inches to 2 foot of water, like shallow, skinny water. Tons and tons of bait in that pocket, a bunch of bait. And that tells me that those fish are behaving like turnover fish, only this year they're a little bit more active. The problem is they're still really spread out, really random, really hard to pattern at times. And that's why a lot of people are going around here this last week or two going, man, it's tough. But yet when we had the Sealy Outdoors last weekend, we had 14 overs. Well, that's because the fish are biting. They're just really inconsistent in random areas and hard to find. Man, that pocket we fished is a do-nothing pocket. There's not a whole lot that goes on in there. I couldn't tell you last time I fished in there. It's not a pocket that has any kind of true dynamic bottom contours or content. It's not anything that holds an abundant amount of fish. Those fish were just randomly in that pocket because they ran out of deep water and went to the bank because it's turnover time. And that's, the lake's starting to cool off, which means the shallow water's going to be coolest. And they just went, and we happened to run across an area where they kind of scattered in there and we got to see some active fish. So, knowing that fish can be kind of randomly scattered in the shallows right now, how do you go about locating them and patterning them and targeting them when there is no way to really know exactly where they're going to be or exactly how to catch them? That's a challenge. It's a very, very big challenge. And Cord, you just chime in whenever you want to, but I know for me, honestly, and this is a terrible way to be, but this is the best I got. The best thing you can do, look for signs of life, first cover water. Move. But when you find fish, stop, right? Because it's hard to catch them. Even though they're a little active, they're not really biting the best. So, when I do actually find fish, when I finally get into an area, man, I'm going to power pole down a lot. I'm going to sit and make repeated casts a lot. I'm going to change through baits, give them different options, throw them different looks, go finesse, go reaction, go big, go small, do a little bit of everything. I'm going to throw the board at them. But the key thing for me to help me be more consistent day in, day out and give myself the best chance to put my customers on fish is to cover more water and just be super efficient covering water. And then even if I don't catch a fish, if I see birds lined up on the bank and I see shad everywhere and I can look around on modern technology and see fish on my graph with the Lowrance Active Target and the Humminbird 360 and I can see those fish around on my graph, I'm going to stop and slow down once I find life in fish and I feel confident that there's bass there because they are still hard to catch. So you're going to go past fish fishing fast and not catch them. So when you're confident there's fish there, you got to stop. What do you think?
It's junk fishing 101 is
that's the proper term.
I got about 6 rods on the deck and they'll stay there for a while. I mean, a couple different top waters like frog and a spook, and I got a swim bait and a flipping jig, and then I'll rotate like a chatterbait or spinner bait in and out. There's that, and like I said, find a pocket that's got bait and just go to town. And I've caught fish over the past 3 days, late morning. And I caught one on a jig in probably 6 inches of water 2 evenings ago. Right before that, I caught one right up on the grass line, about a foot on a frog, and then just scattered random, caught one on a dock here or there. Just flipping everything, all them little stick ups and stuff, just making a quick pitch. Just pitch it, hop, hop, get out of there. I mean, you're covering a lot of water. You're not just picking it apart. Now, I get a couple bites really quick, like something's different in the bank or there's clusters or it's a harder bottom or whatever. Then, like I said, I'll slow down and I'll go back down the stretch. I might throw something different,
That's another thing too, right? Get everything you can out of the areas you can catch them in. So you go through an area, you get a couple bites. Don't be scared to turn around and go back through there with something different, give them a different look. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Square bill is a good way to cover it because you can throw it in like just about anything. To me, that's one of the better ones right now. Like it's a little 1.5 size, like a smaller. You can throw it. You can get in some tight spots and burn down the bank. But if you go pluck 1 or 2 off in a half-mile stretch with that, then you might be able to pick up your worm or your jig and be a little bit more meticulous.
Yeah, more thorough. Yeah. I think crankbaits are a great tool this time of year. I think they're really important. I think it's really important to have a variety of shallow diving crankbaits ready to go, from the finesse square bills to 1.5s, and even honestly sometimes with the oversized ones like the Movement 80X, which is a shallow diving crankbait but has a bigger body. Because you're going to encounter different size shad. We're enough into the turnover now where you're going to get different size shad in different areas. Certain areas you're going to have really small shad. You're going to need really small baits. And in certain areas like those shad we saw over there right before the seminar,
a little bit better fit.
Those were like grown threadfin. They're like almost as long as your hand threadfin. They're not the big giant gizzard shad, but they were bigger shad. And at times you would see those shad come out of the water from bass chase. In fact, I saw one chase after a big shad, and it came out of the water 3 or 4 times, and I got over as fast as I could, and I threw a dang 9-inch glide bait over there. Because I had been fishing around a bunch of small baits, so everything I had tied on was a little profile. Well, I seen this shad was a lot bigger than anything I had tied on, except for this one 9-inch glide bait that, to be honest with you guys, it's the new one from 6 Cents, and I had it tied on because I haven't got a chance to really fish with it yet. And so I've been wanting to just, if nothing else, play with it in the water, learn how it twitches and all that. I happen to have it tied on. I picked it up, threw it out there, and started working it back to the boat, and like a 4-pounder was like under it all the way to the boat. It just wouldn't bite it. But on the first cast, I threw that giant glide bait out there, and one follows it to the boat. So we've been talking to you guys here the last few weeks about throwing little baits. Well, now we're starting to see those bigger shad get on the bank. Those big baits start to play now, and that fish followed me to the boat, and I didn't catch him, but I picked up a jerkbait and slowed down and went through that area with a jerkbait, and I used the Lowrance active target to find a little group of 2 or 3 fish, threw that jerkbait to them, reeled up right behind them, started twitching it, watched them react to it, made one more twitch, and I caught one. So that active target deal is unbelievable. I could go on a whole spiel. I just did a video Wednesday, so I don't want to go back into that, but I could go on and on and on, and I am just getting my feet wet with that thing. I spent most of the year playing with different mounts, trying to not have it mounted on the trolling motor, and to be honest with you guys, I couldn't find one that I wouldn't break. Every mount that was separate from the trolling motor shaft, I broke it. So now it's just on my trolling motor shaft. But luckily we're going to a time of year where I can kind of stay shallow, power pole down when I see a fish on it, and then do that. But yeah, crankbaits are real important, because crankbaits do 2 things. They allow you to cover a lot of water. And if you have just a couple different ones, shallow diving crankbaits on, well, you can really cover any type of shallow water you come into contact with. Honestly, you really can. But the other reason they're so important is because of the reaction quality. You got to remember, you're dealing with fish that don't feel real good. They're coming out of a long summer. They're not in the best of shape. They're more active than normal for turnover, but they're still not just biting everything you throw at them. And it's Lake Fork. Hey, reaction baits are a plus at all times on Lake Fork, because we know how these fish get pressured out here. For the size of the lake this is, there's no other big name lake that's this small and gets this kind of pressure. I mean, these fish per acre are as pressured as it gets. So having a bait that causes fish to react is oftentimes, more often than not, a really important thing specifically for Lake Fork. But no matter what lake you're on, when you're dealing with turnover, a reactive style bait is going to be really important. When the fishing gets tough, I don't care if it's post frontal, I don't care if it's turnover, I don't care what the situation is. When the fishing's real tough, you have to go to the extremes, in my opinion. You either go extremely finesse or extremely power fishing reactive. You're either going to have to keep that bait in their face so long that it teases them into biting because it's just there forever and it's small and it's easy meal, or you're going to have to force them into a reaction. Crankbaits are great for turnover. Fish that don't want to bite, that crankbait comes along, bounces off something hard and kicks out to the side. Bass just can't stand that, guys. I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever experienced that. I mean, I know a lot of people have, some may not have, but when you get a crankbait to bounce off something hard the correct way, and it really deflects to the side real hard, the way a bass hits that is different than when you're just reeling a crankbait and you load up on it, right? Like when it bounces, they react and smash it. And even a fish that's sitting there, and now that I have active target, I can watch them. Like, I can watch a fish sit there, and I may throw a crankbait over his head 15 times, and he doesn't move. But that one time that I deflect right, he flashes at it, even if he doesn't eat it. Every time, I'm telling you guys, every single time that you hit something right and it deflects and bounces off, that fish, if he's near that, he's flashing at it every time. I've seen it too many times on this new live sonar that we have, where when that crankbait actually hits something hard and bounces off, that fish comes to it every time, whether he bites it or not. So that's why crankbaits to me are such an important tool this time of year.
That is something different, because you got to think too, on top of all those wonderful conditions you listed, you're competing against every bait fish in the lake, all those big schools. So you got to find some way to set yourself apart, and to still get them to react. You know, I change my colors up. Is one thing that I try to do instead of throw. I mean, I got a shad pattern on right now, but I'll get to where I'll start rotating, where I'll throw a red one, or I'll throw a chartreuse and black, or throwing different colors so it'll look different. You know what I mean? Because everybody and their brother is throwing something shad colored, and that's all they're seeing. If they see that bright yellow thing come by their face, bouncing off wood, you know, I feel like there's times it gets a little bit more than the next guy that's just throwing a normal shad color, or throwing a swim bait but dying the tail chartreuse, or something little, you know, something different.
Yeah, I think that's good. Yeah, and especially if you see, that's the thing for schooling fish too. I had a guy ask me this on a live stream last night. He was like, "What do you do when you're fishing for fish that are schooling on the surface real good, but you can't get them to bite whatever you're throwing?" Well, you know, everybody, I think when fish are schooling, everybody concentrates on trying to match the hatch, and that's good, and a lot of times that works. But there are times when not matching the hatch is the deal. Make your bait stand out from all. Like when you have an overwhelming amount of bait that those fish are schooling on, a lot of times you have to throw something that those fish can differentiate between the bait fish. Because you got to remember, it's a bass. He's an apex predator. He ain't scared of anything at all. He's the meanest creature that lives in fresh water. He just is in this area. So he's not going to be intimidated by anything, and he's going to eat when he's in that feeding frenzy of schooling activity. He's going to eat pretty much anything he can at that point. But if there's so much bait that he can't pick your bait out from it, a lot of times he'll bite it better if you throw a green pumpkin fluke instead of a shad colored fluke. Or if you throw just something off the wall, like you said, throw chartreuse black on your crankbait, or just anything different. I don't know. I mean, I've thrown wacky worm in school and fish and caught them. That looks nothing like a shad. It looks nothing like a bait fish. But it's something that I throw into a feeding frenzy and it sits there and hangs in their face, and it's easy for them to identify it and see it amongst all the other things that don't look like that.
Clown killer jerkbait's a good one that I've had good success on because the water's just clean enough here that you can get away with throwing something like that. Though, I mean, you don't got to get crazy. I mean,
man, speaking of jerkbaits, can we talk about a jerkbait for a minute? Because I know you like to throw them.
I freaking love them.
You're from Oklahoma. I know you love throwing jerkbait. A jerkbait to me, the more, and I haven't always been a big time jerkbait fisherman. I would throw them in the wintertime in the pre-spawn when everybody threw them, and I kind of didn't mess with them. I hated having to wait for that pause. I can't stand having a moving bait in my hands and then having to pause and hold it and wait. Like, it drives me crazy. And it still does. It still does. But I'm dealing with it and sucking it up and fishing it anyway, because the more I get into it, when you really look at the big time tournaments that have been won on it, the tournaments where people go, man, it's tough fishing, and then the guy that wins it dominates and blows everybody out on a jerkbait. This lake being as pressured as it is, and they bite a jerkbait year round.
Yeah.
A jerkbait might be the best bass fishing lure of all time, and I think the reason why is because it makes them react.
Yeah.
You know, when we talked about a crankbait bouncing off a stump, a jerkbait does that same thing every time you twitch it if you twitch it right. Like, it goes, like, that's what it does when you twitch it if you do it right. So it's getting that sudden change of direction. Like, if that fish will pay attention to that jerkbait, when you hit it and it does this, he's gonna react and lunge at it. It's like a cat. If you got that laser dot on the floor and you crawl that laser dot up to that cat and he's looking at it, if you twitch that laser dot real fast, what's that cat gonna do? He gonna pounce. It's the same thing with these bass and a jerkbait or a crankbait deflecting these reaction bites that we talk about. It's the exact same principle as a cat that's lurching at, it's pouncing on something.
Yeah, and you can throw them shallow, deep, and you'll get hung up in the trees a little bit, but you'd be surprised if you're going shallow one, and I'll give credit where credit's due. I learned this trick from Patrick Walters himself. If you're trying to fish shallow around a lot of wood, throw your big build jerkbait. It sounds crazy. There's a video out there on YouTube. You can watch it. Same one where I learned it, and he shows throwing it from like 1 to 3 foot of water around like laydowns and stuff. And when he twitches it, something about that way that big bill makes it stand up even more. It's just like a square bill. It
deflects and rolls off the timber better.
But you throw a short build one that's designed to run 1 to 4 foot, it'll hang up 75% more.
Interesting.
It's like I said, that's not my invention. That's all Patrick Walters, the man that broke the century belt on this lake throwing a jerkbait in the fall.
It set the margin of victory record, all-time record for margin of victory.
32 something pounds or something like that.
By a lot. Yeah, he had 100 and Combs had 70 something.
Yeah.
So it's 30 pounds, yeah.
I'm pretty sure he caught like a 9-pounder right out in front of here
somewhere. Right over that hill right there, sure did.
I mean,
well, he caught most of it. Everybody, that's the funny thing about that tournament, because he went over it like at the end on the last day when everybody was tuning in to live coverage, because it was like what Patrick Walters was doing was so special. They saw him down there at the mouth of Little Caney, right outside the mouth of Little Caney, in what we call the pig pen.
Yeah.
I'll tell y'all why we call it the pig pen here, man. It's kind of funny. That's something that me and Patrick actually just came up with, started calling it. We called it the pig pen. So, yeah. But everybody thinks he caught a lot of his fish in that tournament down there, because at the end of every day they would show him down there. Well, he was just going down there fishing down there because it was close to weigh-in, and he could fish till the last minute and then go in. Like, that's the only reason he was going down there. And he was finding some fish down there. And then on the last day, he caught a couple really good ones that put him over the century mark. But most of his fish that counted in that tournament were caught right outside this marina to the left, right around that corner, in that little isolated patches of standing timber and those shallow points. That's where he caught almost all the fish in that tournament. So Oh, so the pig pen deal is he did all that back in the fall, and then on day one in the spring this year, in April when they were here, he caught 30 pounds, and he caught them on some shallow shell bed points on a jerkbait on day one in that same area right outside the mouth of Little Caney. So on day two, they put up this graphic, and it's showing like the fish that he caught last fall. And by the way, in that fall tournament, Seth Fighter caught the biggest bass of the tournament in the same little area. And so it's showing all these big fish that were caught in that area in the fall tournament on day one of the spring tournament. And they had pig icons on all these deals. And I screenshotted that. I screenshotted that on day two because Patrick Walters was struggling. And that night I sent it to him. I said, "You're going to have to get out of that pig pen, son. It's wore out." And so from then on, we've been calling it the pig pen.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, jerkbait is very versatile, and I keep one rigged up year round. I've got one right now.
I don't. How many people sit here today fish a jerkbait a lot, like year round a lot? Nobody. Yeah, me neither until the last couple of years. But you guys are all wrong. Like y'all are all wrong, because if you go look at the best tournament anglers, the guys that, I mean, listen, as a guide, we make our money by putting fish in the boat, but guiding is different than tournament fishing. You look at the guys that are fishing for themselves, that are competing, they got to catch the best 5 fish they can every day, or got to catch the most fish they can on MLF on the Bass Pro Tour. Look at their boat, the best ones. They've all got a jerkbait on all year.
Look what the top 3, almost 5 guys in the Red Crest this year, what were they throwing? The jerkbait, which they were throwing active target or using active target, but Patrick Walters throwing jerkbait. You watch any Brandon Polnick's videos, guaranteed at some point during any of his Bassmaster Elite Series, he pulls out a jerkbait. Somewhere, sometime, he pulls up somewhere.
Well,
I mean, it's easy to tell what he's throwing.
The greatest of all time, by most people's standards, the greatest of all time is Kevin Van Dam. And we've all seen Kevin Van Dam throw a jerkbait year round for a lot of years. But yet we don't do it because we don't have confidence in it. Well, I'm telling you, what you need to do is spend some time getting confident in jerkbait. Because there's just not another bait that day in, day out will make a bass react better than a jerkbait will.
I've won a lot of money this year on
I mean, they could be not on a jerkbait bite at all. Like, that's the thing about a jerkbait that makes it so special. They can be on a jig bite. They can be on a Carolina rig. They can be on whatever you want to call it bite. It doesn't matter. Spinnerbait bite, swim bait, whatever. They're still, like, when that jerkbait does this in his face, he's going to react to it. And sometimes they're going to commit enough to get hooked. And that's just how a jerkbait is. So
it does take some getting used to, and if you throw one all day, every day, until you get your body used to it, it will wear your ass out. I've done it in tournaments where I did 2 or 3 days in a row. Like, I placed really well in Grand this year, and
it's a working.
I had 2 rods on my deck. I had a 1-ounce spinnerbait and I had a jerkbait. I made about 5 casts with that spinnerbait, and from like 7:15 till I weighed in at 4:30. I'd never put that jerkbait down. That's all I threw all day this week. I was sleeping doing this. Sleep, I mean, but...
Yeah, you wake up middle of the night, your arm's twitching.
Yeah, but I caught like 16, almost 17 pounds doing it.
Right.
Whenever it was a blown out lake. I mean, I found the one clean water, and the water temp was 49 to 51 degrees.
So you had a flooded, blown out lake that was cold, too. That's bad.
Yeah.
That's bad conditions.
And, I caught a 514, and I had one the same size or bigger that I lost because I tried to be Superman and boat flip it, and that didn't work out too well. Otherwise, I probably would have won that tournament. But
well, you got to stop hanging around me.
Yeah.
But I don't fish a lot of tournaments, so I just boat flip. And if they get off, we just laugh about it and move on. So, what about let's talk about how to identify when you're in an area with a lot of bait. Is that something y'all want us to discuss? Because I think a lot of people probably have that and kind of know what to do to how to identify when bait's in an area. But some of the guys that may be a little more novice or just less experienced this time of year may not really understand how to know bait is in an area. So